Tom was sitting in the kitchen, sipping his morning coffee and looking through the mail. Among the usual advertising letters and bills, he noticed an envelope with the bank's logo. His heart sank. He hadn't expected anything like this. Tearing the envelope open, he had no idea that this letter would change his life. His eyes ran over the lines and froze. The house he grew up in was in foreclosure. The bank demanded to pay off the debt, which amounted to more than $300,000. Otherwise, the property would be put up for auction. Tom read the letter twice. Then a third time. It had to be a mistake. His parents had always said that the house was fully paid off and that he would inherit it after their deaths. But instead of a secure future, he was now in huge debt. Tom stood up abruptly. His head was pounding and his hands were shaking. He could not believe it. This must be a mistake. He muttered and picked up the phone. His first impulse was to call his lawyer, but he remembered that he hadn't signed anything yet. He needed to sort this out first. He took out the documents for the house, which were kept in the closet, and began to look through them. Among the papers, he found a mortgage agreement dated a few years earlier. His parents had taken out a large loan against the house. But why? Why didn't he know anything about it? Tom felt real for the first time. He grabbed his head. How many times had his parents assured him that they had all their financial affairs under control? How many times had they said there was nothing to worry about? He looked at the date. The loan was taken out exactly 10 years ago. So all these years they had been lying to his face, assuring him that he would inherit the house without any problems. Suddenly, memories popped into his heading a new car, trips on vacation, repairs to the house. At the time, it seemed logical his parents were just using the money they had saved. But now Tom realized that it was a loan. His anger grew. Tom knew he had to act immediately. He took out his laptop, opened the bank's website, and logged into his father's account. There were only a few $100s left in the account, and the debt was growing. He took a deep breath. This couldn't be true. He tried to call his sister, who lived in another city, but she didn't answer. Tom realized that this was only the beginning. He would have to get to the bottom of the truth. And he wouldn't stop until he found out why his parents had left him in this situation. Tom was sitting in the living room of his parents' house, scattering papers on the table. A headache throbbed in his temples, and his mind was full of questions. He closed his eyes, and another evening came to mind, one that seemed so distant and carefree. He was 10 years old. His father was sitting in his favorite chair, holding a financial newspaper on his lap. Tom was spinning a small car in his hands and asking, "Dad, when I grow up, will I have to work?" His father smiled, put the newspaper down, and beckoned him closer. "If you're smart, son, you won't have to worry about money. We have taken care of it." The mother, who was sitting next to him with embroidery in her hands, picked up, "Yes, our house will be yours. You will never be left without a roof over your head." Tom remembered how calm he felt then. His parents had always seemed to him to be the ones in control. He grew up thinking they knew what they were doing. He was 16 when his mother first mentioned the family heritage. "Your father and I have worked hard to secure your future, Tom. The house is paid off, we have savings. You can build your life without worrying about debt." And at the time, he didn't attach much importance to this. He was more interested in his friends, his studies, girls. He had no reason to doubt his parents' words. And a 30-year-old Tom returned home after living in another city for several years. He already had his own career, but he still considered his home a place of peace. "How are you, Dad?" he asked as he sat down at the kitchen table. We're fine, son," his father replied, sipping his coffee. "We live without worries. Everything we have will be yours one day." Tom did not even realize then that it was all a lie, and he opened his eyes and came back to the brutal truth. The house he had been promised as an inheritance had not been paid. His parents had taken out loans, probably spent the money on something else, and now he was left with the burden. Tom sighed and looked around. Everything in this house reminded him of the past, and the paintings on the walls, the old furniture, even the porcelain vase his mother had loved so much. He felt scared at the thought that very soon all this could be in the hands of strangers. He did not know, but he intended to find out. Tom sat in his father's office, surrounded by piles of papers. The cabinets were filled with old bills, letters from the bank, insurance documents, but it all looked chaotic, as if his parents themselves did not fully understand what to do with it. He flipped through the papers, hoping to find something that would explain the situation. "Come on. Where have you been hiding the truth?" he muttered, pulling out another folder, on a document after document, and suddenly a sum he hadn't expected caught his eye. Opening one of the letters, Tom saw numbers that made his heart sink. Several loans, a mortgage, credit cards that had almost reached their limit. His fingers trembled as he picked up the phone and dialed the number of the family lawyer, Mr. Carlisle, at Tom. A low, even voice answered, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Thank you," Tom said quickly, "but I want to know the truth. How long has this been going on?" Carlisle sighed. "Can we meet? There are some things that are better discussed in person." An hour later, Tom was sitting in Carlisle's office. "I didn't want to bring this up before." The lawyer began, interlocking his fingers, "but your parents have had financial problems for years." Tom shook his head. "No, why didn't they tell me? But they always said they'd manage. But every time they took out a new loan to pay off old debts." It's a trap!" Tom exclaimed. Carlisle nodded. "It was. As a result, they left behind not an inheritance, but a debt hole." Tom decided that one lawyer was not enough. He called Aunt Mary, your mother's sister. "Oh, Tom." Her voice trembled. "I don't know all the details, but your father once said he needed money to fix things." "Did he say it was temporary?" Tom asked. "Always. But years went by, and everything remained the same." Tom began to put the puzzle together, but he was still missing pieces. They hadn't just not told him the truth. They might not even have realized what they were getting themselves into. There was only one thing left to find the source of the debt and find out what really made his parents take such a risk. Tom was sitting at his desk, a pile of financial documents lying in front of him that he had pulled out of an old cardboard box. Dusty envelopes, yellowed checks, bank statements he had never seen before. His heart was pounding in his chest as each new document brought only worse news. He slowly opened a thick folder that was hidden at the bottom of the box. He saw transaction printouts, long shopping lists, loans and credit card statements. You've got to be kidding me," he whispered, looking from one document to the next. His parents had always said they were living modestly, saving money, and preparing a stable future for him. But these numbers told a different story. They were spending more than they were earning. Tom ran his finger down the list of expenses. He noticed regular transfers to large appliance stores, furniture stores, and expensive restaurants. Why did they have to buy a new TV almost every year? He couldn't believe his eyes. Then there were hotel bills, casino payments, huge sums of money for expensive resorts. They lived as if the money would never end, he said bitterly. Tom took out his phone and dialed his Aunt Mary's number. "Oh, Aunt, I found the papers. They've been in debt their whole lives, and they've been hiding it from me." Mary fell silent. "You knew, didn't you?" Tom," she began. "We all knew." Tom felt the blood rush to his face. "Oh, and no one said a word to me. We didn't want to upset you. And besides, it was their business. Their business." Tom's voice broke. "And now it's my problem." And he realized that his childhood memories of the financial stability were just an illusion. His parents had lived in debt, spent their last dime, and his family simply turned a blind eye. Tom closed his eyes and tried to calm down. And he knew that now he would have to clean up the mess. And the question was not how it happened. Tom stood in the living room of his Aunt Mary's house, clutching a stack of financial documents. In front of him was his family, his aunt, uncle, cousin, and sister. They were sitting on the couch, avoiding his gaze. There was a tense silence in the room, which was broken by Tom's voice. "You all knew, Evita." His voice trembled with anger. "You knew that my parents spent more than they had, that they mortgaged the house, that they were in debt." Mary sighed and looked at her husband. Tom calmed down. Calm down. He threw the documents on the table. "You've been lying to me for years. You let me believe that after my parents died, I would have at least some stability." "We just wanted to protect you," his aunt finally said. Tom laughed sarcastically. Protect me? From what?" "From the truth. From pain, Tom." His uncle interjected. "Your parents did everything they could to make you feel good." Okay. They left me with no future." A cousin, Matt, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke up. "Why are you reacting like that? They lived the way they wanted to. It was their money." Tom felt his anger boiling up again. "It wasn't their money, it was loans." "Loans that are now on me." "You weren't the perfect son either, Tom," Sister Mary suddenly said. "You left. You didn't know how they lived in recent years. I worked, earned money, created my own life. That doesn't justify the fact that they cheated on me." "But you never asked how they were doing," my aunt said dryly. "You just trusted that they would figure it out. They lied to me, and you let them do it." Tom took a deep breath. "Are you really trying to make me look guilty for not checking how they were spending the money?" No one answered. "And, you were comfortable not saying anything," he said more quietly, "because it didn't affect you." Aunt Mary sighed. "We didn't want to interfere. And now that I'm left with these debts, you don't care either." My uncle lowered his head. "Tom, it's your problem now." Tom looked at them one last time. "I get it. You've never been on my side." He took the documents and left the house, slamming the door. Tom sat in his father's old office, piles of documents scattered in front of him. His hands were shaking as he flipped through pages of bank statements, loan agreements, and checks. What he had just discovered made his heart sink. He had always thought of his parents as responsible people. Sure, they weren't financial geniuses, but how could they have destroyed their future so thoughtlessly? Tom dug deeper into the documents. Here were payments that had nothing to do with home maintenance or medical expenses. Instead, he saw large sums transferred to the accounts of other family members, Uncle Harold, Cousin Matt, and even his Aunt Mary. You've got to be kidding me," Tom muttered as he read the purpose of the payments. A car loan for Matt, help for his aunt to repair the house, payment for Uncle Harold's medical treatment, and that was just the surface. Tom leaned back in his chair, wrapping his arms around his head. This meant only one thing: his parents, drowning in debt themselves, were giving money to others who had no plans to pay it back. They were just using it, and he told himself. Furious, Tom dialed Aunt Mary's number. She answered after a few rings. "Tom, is something wrong?" Yes, something happened. His voice was cold. I found the bank statements. Monty, is it true that your parents gave you money to repair the house? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Tom, it was a long time ago. So, it's true. Were you ever going to return them? Your parents never asked for it back. Because they had nothing to eat. Don't exaggerate. Tom broke down. I found more money, Aunt. Uncle Harold, Matt, they all took money from my inheritance. Tom, your parents were always generous. My uncle, who was obviously listening on the speakerphone, interrupted. This is not generosity. This is a financial disaster. They loved their family, Mary replied coldly. You just don't understand that. All I understand is that you all got money, and now I'm left with nothing. Tom, it's not our fault they wanted to help. Tom took a deep breath. What a family you are. You want us to return the money? Matt asked sarcastically. Yes, I do. Tom, it was a long time ago. We can't, said my aunt. Can't or won't. There was silence again. I see, Tom said. He hung up the phone. His own family had used his parents and now refused to admit their guilt. He was left with debts that no one was going to help him pay off. Tom stood on the threshold of his childhood home, which now felt more like a burden than a place of memories. It had once been a place of laughter, the smell of his mother's pie, and his father's advice. But now it was just a house with a mortgage and memories that had changed their color. The documents in his hands meant only one thing. He had two options. Or to sell the house to pay off his debts, or leave everything behind and start from scratch. Tom closed his eyes. He imagined his father sitting on the veranda, telling stories about his life, his mother fixing the flowers in the garden. And look, they were good people. They loved him. But they had also ruined his financial future. He knew this conversation would be his last. His entire family was already waiting for him at Aunt Mary's house, and when Tom walked in, everyone fell silent. Uncle Harold, Matt, Mary, they all looked guilty, but no one was in a hurry to change anything. So, what have you decided? Matt asked dryly. Tom threw the documents on the table. You all took advantage of my parents' generosity, and now you're pretending it's not your problem. Tom, Mary began, but he held up a hand to stop her. Enough with the excuses. I sold the house. The money will go to pay off my debts. The room became even quieter. So you're just leaving? Harold asked. Yes. And you won't forgive us? Tom looked at them. His heart was torn between anger and fatigue. Do you even realize what you've done? Mary looked down. Matt ran his fingers over the edge of the table. No one said a word. That's the problem. Tom smiled bitterly. You won't even admit you're guilty. He turned and walked out. A light wind was blowing outside. Tom took a deep breath. His life was just starting from scratch.